Welcome to Order Before Modern Systems. Here, we explore how everyday order functioned before modern systems, institutions, and formal rules existed. This channel examines how routine, habit, and shared expectations shaped daily life long before modern organization took form. Order through shared timelines means something simple. In many societies, people stayed organized because they shared the same schedule. Long before modern police departments, long before phone alerts and GPS time, communities still needed order. They needed people to work, rest, trade, worship, settle disputes, and avoid danger at the same times. Shared timelines were one of the strongest tools for this. A shared timeline is a common pattern of time that many people follow together. It can be daily, like sunrise to sunset. It can be weekly, like market days or rest days. It can be seasonal, like planting and harvest. It can also be political or religious, like court days or holy days. This system did not require constant surveillance. It did not require officers on every corner. Instead, it used predictable rhythms to shape behavior. When most people move through the day in the same order, it becomes easier to notice problems, enforce rules, and coordinate responsibilities. This video explains how shared timelines structured order across several historical periods. It focuses on how common rhythms, work, rest, seasons, and public time signals aligned behavior across communities. And it shows how those rhythms supported systems of crime control, justice, investigation, and punishment before modern law enforcement. First, it helps to understand why time itself is a form of control. When a community agrees on when things happen, it creates a baseline. It becomes clear when someone is late, when someone is out of place, when someone is breaking a rule, or when a dispute can be handled. Shared time also reduces confusion. It allows people to coordinate without needing constant discussion. In modern life, we often take this for granted. Our shared timeline is built into clocks, calendars, work schedules, school bells, store hours, shipping systems, and legal deadlines. In earlier societies, shared timelines were built in different ways. Many depended on natural cycles, daylight, weather, and seasons. Others depended on public signals, bells, drums, and announcements. Some depended on fixed calendar systems backed by religion and government. These systems were not perfect. They were often uneven, local, and sometimes disputed, but they created enough shared structure for communities to function. Now let us look at the major building blocks of shared timelines. One is the daily cycle, day and night. Before electric lighting, night was a major boundary. Darkness limited travel. It increased the risk of injury, theft, and fires. It also made it harder to identify people. Many societies treated night as a special legal and social time. When most daily life stops at nightfall, order becomes easier in one sense. Streets grow quieter. Businesses close. Families gather indoors. The community becomes easier to account for. But night also creates a challenge. How do you control the small number of people who must stay active? How do you prevent disorder in the dark? This is where shared timelines often become strict. In many towns, authorities used curfews. Curfews were not always about politics. In many medieval European towns, they were linked to fire prevention. Houses were often built from wood and packed closely together. A single unattended hearth could threaten an entire neighborhood. A curfew signal, often a bell, helped set a shared rule, cover or extinguish fires, end certain work, and reduce movement in the streets. Even when curfews later gained other meanings, the key idea remained. A public signal marks a shift from day behavior to night behavior. Curfew systems supported order in several ways. They created a shared expectation that people should be home. This made nighttime movement stand out. They simplified enforcement. If the rule is, most people should not be outside after the signal, then watchmen and neighbors have a clear standard. They made investigation easier. If a crime happens at night, questions become sharper. Who was out? Why were they out? Who saw them? Who can confirm their reason? Curfews also tied into a second shared timeline tool, watches and patrols. In parts of medieval England, legal traditions emphasized communal responsibility for keeping the peace. One famous mechanism was hue and cry, where people were expected to raise an alarm and pursue a fleeing suspect, and others who heard were expected to help. Laws like the Statute of Winchester in 1285 laid out rules for watch and ward, strengthening the idea that local communities must provide night watch and respond to crime. This kind of system only works well when time is shared. If a town has a recognized night period marked by curfew, then the watch knows when duty begins. Residents know when the streets should be clear. A person caught outside after the expected time can be questioned or held. In later interpretations, English nightwalker rules allowed watchmen to arrest strangers found out at night and hold them until morning. The shared timeline turns the night into a controlled space. But shared timelines were not only about stopping behavior, they also organized positive duties. In communal systems, responsibility often depends on scheduled appearances, musters, court sessions, and group meetings. If people do not share the same calendar expectations, accountability weakens. That leads to the next major timeline tool, the calendar. A calendar does more than count days. It separates time into categories. It tells people which days are normal work days, which are sacred, which are market days, and which are suitable for official business. In ancient Rome, the public calendar was deeply tied to law and public life. Roman calendars, known as fasti, did not only list dates, they marked the legal character of days. Some days were fasti, meaning it was permitted to conduct legal business. Other days were nefasti, when political and judicial activities were restricted. Other markings indicated public holidays and special conditions. This is a clear example of shared timelines structuring justice. If courts are only open on certain days, then legal action must follow the calendar. If assemblies and elections only happen on certain days, then political order follows time rules. If some days prohibit certain activities, then the calendar itself becomes a regulator. This kind of time structure also helps manage conflict. When there are clear court days and clear forbidden days, people can plan. Disputes can be delayed into the proper time. This reduces spontaneous private retaliation because there is an agreed public process, and it has a schedule. Rome also had repeating cycles that shaped economic life. One example is the nundinal cycle, an 8-day market rhythm marked with letters on the calendar. Market days drew people from the countryside into the city. This changed the social environment in a predictable way. Predictability matters for order. When a city knows the market day is coming, it can prepare. Officials can focus on crowd management. Rules about weights, measures, and disputes can be applied when trade is concentrated. The market rhythm becomes a repeating pulse that the city's control systems can follow. A shared timeline also shapes the physical use of space. On market days, roads are busier. Inns fill. Stalls open. Theft risks change. Debt disputes rise. Conflicts over pricing and quality become more common. By concentrating these activities into known times, authorities can focus their limited enforcement capacity when it is needed most. Now let us shift from calendars to daily hours. Many societies used public time signals to divide the day. Without personal clocks, people relied on shared cues. In medieval Christian Europe, church bells were one of the most powerful shared time systems. Monasteries and churches observed a daily cycle of prayers, known as the canonical hours. The traditional set includes matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, nun, vespers, and compline. These were religious services, but their effect reached beyond religion. Bells ringing through a town gave people a shared sense of the day's segments. This helped structure work. In many places, the working day began and ended in relation to these bells. Curfews could also be announced by bells. Timekeeping was not always precise. In many medieval towns, bells did not ring at exactly the same minute each day. The goal was not perfect precision. The goal was a shared rhythm. This shared rhythm created order in several practical ways. First, it coordinated labor. If most craftspeople, laborers, and merchants start and stop around the same signals, then streets fill and empty in predictable waves. Second, it coordinated supervision. Town officials, guild leaders, and household heads could judge behavior against common expectations. Third, it supported public safety. If people know that after a certain bell, gates close and movement should slow, then night risks are reduced. Fourth, it supported communal enforcement. In a world with limited formal policing, neighbors are a key part of control. Neighbors can only judge what is suspicious if they share an idea of what is normal. Shared timelines define normal. If a blacksmith's hammer is heard during normal work hours, it is expected. If it is heard long after the town has settled under curfew, it draws attention. If a stranger is seen walking near the gates during the day, it may be ordinary. At night, it becomes a question. This is how time can function like a soft boundary, even without walls. Now, let us connect shared timelines to group responsibility systems. In medieval England, systems like Frank Pledge organized households into groups that shared responsibility for keeping the peace. In some versions, men were organized into small groups, often called tithings. If someone in the group was suspected of wrongdoing, the group could be responsible for producing him in court. If they failed, they could be fined. These systems depended on scheduled courts and scheduled attendance. When the community must appear at regular sessions, such as a court leet that holds view of Frankpledge, time becomes the backbone of accountability. A shared timeline makes it possible to ask who failed to appear on the expected day, who did not bring the accused, who was absent when the community was called. Because the system is collective, missing an appearance is not only a personal issue. It disrupts a shared obligation. In this way, scheduled time supports investigation and punishment. A crime is not only about what happened. It is also about whether the community follows the process afterward. Now let us widen the lens beyond Europe. Across many regions, shared timelines combined religious practice with civic regulation. In Islamic cities in the medieval period, one office associated with public order and market supervision was the Muqtasib, linked to the broader concept of Hizbah. The Muqtasib could supervise markets, checking standards like weights and measures, and overseeing conduct in public spaces. Markets, like in Rome and medieval Europe, work best under predictable rhythms. Trade concentrates at certain times. Disputes arise in patterns. Crowds create special risks. When market activity follows known hours and known days, supervision becomes possible with limited manpower. In many societies shaped by prayer schedules, the day also had a shared rhythm tied to worship and public life. The exact system differs by place and era, but the basic idea remains: shared time signals help coordinate behavior. Now consider a very different case: Imperial China. Large cities required strong coordination because they held dense populations and complex layers of authority. In several periods, Chinese cities used drum and bell signals connected to curfew systems. The signals marked the closing and opening of gates and the boundaries of permitted movement. In some accounts of Tang Dynasty administration, the curfew was enforced by clear signals and penalties, with exceptions for certain urgent needs or official business. This system connected time, space, and law. The curfew signal marks the legal shift. Gate closures limit movement. Patrols and checkpoints enforce the rule. Penalties define the cost of breaking the shared timeline. Again, the goal was not just punishment. It was predictable order. If most people accept that nighttime movement is restricted, then crime opportunities shrink. Fire risks shrink. Street conflict shrinks. And just as important, the state's limited enforcement resources can be focused on the minority who are outside when they should not be. Now let us return to the idea of shared timelines as common rhythms. So far we have discussed daily rhythms and calendar rhythms. But for many pre-modern communities, the deepest timeline was the seasonal cycle. Seasons were not only about weather. They shaped the economy, labor demands, food supply, and migration. In agricultural societies, the year is divided into phases like preparation, planting, tending, harvest, and winter maintenance. These phases create predictable pressure points. During harvest, labor is urgent. Work days are long. People travel to fields. Tools and stored goods are everywhere. Theft risks change. During winter, movement slows. People cluster indoors. Food is scarce. Conflict over resources may rise. Because seasonal demands are shared, communities often develop seasonal rules. They may set times for common grazing. They may set times for collecting wood. They may schedule fairs and markets at points when travel is possible. They may time tax collection or rents to harvest cycles. This matters for justice because disputes often follow the economic calendar. Debt disputes rise after harvest when payment is due. Boundary disputes rise during planting. Theft accusations rise when storage is full. A shared seasonal timeline helps communities predict and manage these conflicts. They can schedule courts after harvest. They can increase watchfulness during fairs. They can strengthen rules around grain storage. In other words, shared timelines allow preventive order. Now we can connect these systems to a broader historical change, the movement from task-based time to clock-based time. Historian E.P. Thompson, writing about time discipline, argued that industrial capitalism depended on stricter, synchronized time. In many older work settings, people worked by task and by natural conditions. Work could be intense at some moments and slower at others. Over time, especially in early modern and industrial settings, work became more regulated by the clock. This shift changed order systems. When work is timed, lateness becomes an offense. When factories run on synchronized schedules, the whole community must align transportation, meals, and rest. When wages depend on hours, time becomes measurable and enforceable. This kind of shared timeline is different from the older village or monastery rhythm. It is more exact. It is less flexible. It can reach deeper into personal life. But the basic principle is the same. Shared time aligns behavior. And aligned behavior produces social order. Now let us summarize the main mechanisms by which shared timelines structured order before modern policing. 1. Time creates predictable patterns. When people share a daily rhythm, it becomes easier to know what belongs and what does not. 2. Time concentrates activity. Market days, fairs, and court days bring many people together at known moments. That allows targeted supervision. 3. Time turns social expectations into enforceable rules. Curfews, gate closures, and night restrictions create clear lines. Enforcement does not require constant force. It requires common agreement and visible signals. 4. Time supports community-based investigation. In systems like Hue and Cry or Frank Pledge, communities respond because they share expectations about when to act and when to appear. 5. Time links law to religion and custom. Holy days, prayer hours, and prohibited days shape what actions are allowed. Even when rules are religious, they have civic effects. 6. Time structures punishment and compliance. Many systems depend on deadlines, appear at court, pay by a certain time, perform required duties in a set season, or face penalties. Now consider what these systems reveal about law enforcement before modern police. In many cases, order was not maintained mainly by chasing criminals after the fact. Instead, order was maintained by shaping daily behavior so that fewer situations could turn into crimes. Shared timelines reduced uncertainty. They reduced unsupervised movement. They reduced random encounters. They made resources easier to guard. They made it easier to detect strangers. They made it easier to coordinate community response. In that sense, shared timelines were part of the infrastructure of justice. Just like roads and gates shape movement, shared time shapes when movement is acceptable. Just like walls define a city's edge, curfew bells define the edge of the day. Just like written law defines rules, calendars define when rules apply. This also explains why disruptions to shared timelines can produce disorder. When a community faces war, famine, plague, or political collapse, shared rhythms can break. Markets become irregular. Courts cannot meet. Travel becomes unsafe. Work schedules collapse. When shared timelines weaken, enforcement becomes harder because normal becomes unclear. That does not mean societies cannot adapt. Many do. But it shows how deeply time supports order. Finally, it is important to notice that shared timelines can be local. A village might follow the sun and the seasons. A monastery might follow canonical hours. A city might follow bells, drums, and gate schedules. An empire might follow official calendars and legal days. These timelines can overlap and sometimes conflict. But when they align, when a community agrees on common rhythms, order becomes easier to sustain, even without modern law enforcement. Shared timelines are not only about punctuality, they are about coordination. They tie together work and rest. They tie together commerce and supervision. They tie together public safety and nighttime limits. They tie together courts and community responsibility. And across many historical periods, they helped communities create predictable behavior patterns that supported systems of crime control, justice, investigation, and punishment. In the world before modern policing, shared time was one of the quiet tools that made public order possible.